What up, what up, what up? It's the man Sean P coming in live. This is the Sean P Experience live on YouTube, man. I am so excited for today's show, man. I've been watching this sister 12 plus years. I can't even count to go back to when I first started seeing Dr. Maat videos, man. And I want to give her flowers right now, live on the air. On her podcast, she has Dr. Kaba and all these great pillars of the community scholars. But having her on my platform, I feel like the same kind of reverence and honor, respect, bow down, like totally respect your scholarship and what you mean for the community, my sister.
Hey, thank you so much, brother. I appreciate your words. And then look, you missing something. Remember, you were a part of one of the book clubs. I forgot exactly which book we were reading. You got to jog my memory, but I
Man, we
remember you
did,
were right
but
there.
I was
Yeah,
there for 3 or 4 books, three or
yeah,
four different
you're
books
right.
that we
Yeah, yes,
did.
you was. Yes,
Uh,
you was. Oh,
I think
you were. Yeah,
the brother
I think
name
it
was
was
Dr. Carbone or Corbine, his name was.
Dr. Kobe Cambon. Was it
That's
that
right,
one, or
that's
was it
right, that
Dr.
one.
Claude Anderson?
That's right, that's right, that's right.
I think
Yep,
it was
yep.
I think it was misorientation. Wasn't it cultural misorientation? Was
Yes,
it that
ma'am.
one?
It was. It was. It
And
was.
then what about Blueprint for Black Power? Were you a
That's
part of
right.
that one?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so
Yes,
we
ma'am.
did. We read some books together and
Yes, we
and
did.
unpacked it. Not
We
just
did.
read it,
No.
but really studied these books,
Yeah.
unpacked it, and then also applied it to our everyday lives. And that's what I love. And shout out to the Read Book Club. Shout out to brother Tiwolo. Shout out to him. And shout out to you, Mr. LA. Mr. LA, love you too, family. Love you too.
My
But yeah,
brother, a scholar, he in the chat. Going to get his PhD pretty soon. He's a scholar,
beautiful.
young brother, a lion, academic. He in there.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And I love to hear that because you and I backstage, we were just talking about the value of education and how it seems like it's dwindling amongst our people. Both of us come from a lineage of educators. And so education, was valued in your family and my family. And to be frank, our people valued education. It wasn't just it was the boomers, it was the boomers' parents. So my grandmother and them who were born in the 1930s, her mother and them, our group, our lineage, and I'm talking about here in America, we valued education. Going all the way back to Africa, if we want to go across the ocean, we've always valued education. It's something, and maybe you and I can unpack that during this session, but something is going on where we see now a shift, and I'm talking about specifically within the Black family, that we don't value education the way we used to. Hell, I want to say this: we don't even value family the way we used to, but that's a whole nother conversation. That's a whole nother conversation. But we don't value education
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
way we used to. It was Malcolm X that said education is the passport to the future. It's the passport to the future. And so a lot of us have Malcolm X on the wall, or we quote Malcolm X, but then we don't practice, or we don't promote his thoughts, his ideas, his principles, his concepts. And he also valued education. And so it's been a shift now in our community where we don't value education. A lot of children, and if you let me rock out for a little bit, brother Sean. I just want to rock out for a little bit. So for those who don't know what I do, I am an educator and I am a professor, and I'll just say at a HBCU. So for those who know me, you know which HBCU that I work at. But I just know how folks are nowadays, Sean. They find out where you work and they don't like something you say, then they want to be calling the university and trying to get you out of there. So I just tell people I work at an HBCU. And what I'm finding, I teach engineering, by the way, at an HBCU. And what I've come to observe, brother Sean, is that a lot of our children, our babies, are coming to the program and they're saying, Doc, I want to be an engineer. And I think that's great. I'm here for it. But what I'm noticing is that they lack the preparation. They lack the tools. And what are the tools? Reading, writing, and mathematics. Reading, writing, and mathematics. And what I found out, brother Sean, because I was like, why don't these kids, I'm putting up problems on the board and I see they're struggling with problem solving. And so initially I said, oh, it's the math. It's the math. They don't understand the math. They have weak algebraic skills. And a lot of them have weak higher level or higher mathematical skills. But I noticed that they have weak algebraic skills. And I'm pointing in that direction. It's just the math. It's the math. Then, brother Sean, what I noticed is that they couldn't read. A lot of them were illiterate. And I didn't know this. I actually made this connection. I'm talking about within the past 2 years, I've made that connection. And I made that connection because what I started doing was I had integrated African and diasporic African STEM achievements into the curriculum. And I have some, publications on that. And so what I do in class is I ask them to bring up the publication, and I'll go down the row and I'll ask students, hey, Mr. So and so, hey, Miss So and so, could you read the first line for me? And I noticed as I was going down the row, I literally had a classroom of 25 students. Only 4 students could read fluidly. Only 4 students could read fluidly. 4 out of a group of 25. And that's when I realized it's not just it's not just that they have weak math skills. They can't even put the problem together because they can't read it. They don't understand it. And so if you're reading something and you lack reading comprehension, then you don't even know what the problem is asking you to solve. So you got that issue. Then on top of that, you have the math issue. Then on top of that, you have the writing issue, because even though we're cultivating engineers had to know how to write. Most of the things we do, like, so when we create things, when we solve problems, we write reports, we write technical reports. And so I'm noticing that we're weak in those areas. And these are areas, Brother Sean, and I'll land my plane. These are areas that we shouldn't be weak in, because our baby should be doing this right in the household. See, reading, writing, and math, it doesn't start in the outside educational institution. And notice I said outside, because your first educational institution is your home. It's on the inside. And so that's why I say the outside. So your child should be reading, writing, and learning basic math right in your household before they go to an outside educational institution. I'm going to land my plane right there, Brother Sean.
You have to get on fire now. You have to get throwing the things, man. Well, first of all, welcome to the Sean P Experience, fam. You see what it is already. We 7 minutes in. I ain't said a word yet. Let me do a formal introduction for my sister to make sure I give our proper reverence, right?
Look, I didn't went off.
Shout out to the chat. Shout out to the chat. Miss Tiffany, shout out to the chat, right? So, peace and power, family. We are tuned in with Sin with the Griots. We're honoring the voices carrying ancient wisdom to modern times. Today, we're sitting with the brilliant mind and powerful educator, Dr. Maat, founder and director of Conscious Ingenuity. Dr. Maat is an engineer, professor, and a cultural architect whose work bridges Africology and STEM. Reimagining how we teach science and technology through the lens of our own heritage. Our mission is clear: to break down systematic barriers in STEM and open doors for Black brilliance to shine. Dr. Maat.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you reading my bio,
Of
letting the
course,
folks
of
know,
course, of course.
letting the folks
So,
know the work that I'm involved in. And I
I love
appreciate your work too. I watch your stuff, and I
to.
appreciate your platform. Oh yeah, I drop in when you go live. I drop in here and there, and I
Oh,
check out some of your guests, and you bring on some amazing guests. So, brother, I see you
right,
too. Just like you see me, I
right.
see you too, brother.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So my first question for my guests, I love to ask this question. This show is called Cinema the Griot. My question to you is, how do you feel when somebody refers to you as a modern day griot or grioti for the ladies? How does that title sit with you, and do you feel any responsibility when it comes to carrying that work in your name?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's a honor. It's a title of honor. It's an honor to be viewed as, and called. Some people say griot, some people say griot. I know that a lot of the elders, they take issue with that. They say call it jelly. They say there's a jelly, but in Meltrek, I refer to the brother as a griot, and so I think that that's an honor. A griot was the person who told the stories. That was the keeper of the information, the knowledge. That was the educator. That was the teacher. And I would also even go as far as just exposing the fact that in my family, um, I'm actually, it was in salute to, and peace be upon his soul, my cousin. Um, Webb. Oh my goodness, I'm thinking about him right now. I want to call him Bernie Webb so bad, but Webb, and he was a Webb, and that was my family surname, and he asked me to maintain the family history. So at our family reunions, I'm responsible, and I actually have video footage of this. I can send it to you. I'm actually responsible during the family reunions to get up and tell the history of the Francis Webb family reunion. I get up every year and I recite our lineage going all the way back to 1804 in our family. And I call the names of those ancestors from Evelina Francis's her lineage, and then Charlie Webb his lineage. One lineage goes back to 1804, the other lineage goes back to 1805. So even within my family, even within my family, they would not say she's a griot or griot because they don't know, they're not familiar with the term, but they do know that I'm the person who's the keeper of our family history, our lineage, and I recite that during the family reunion. So I absolutely will accept and view that title as an honor.
Yes, yes. So my question to you is, how did you first come about your awakening into consciousness? What was the particular moment or an experience or revelation that just shook you awake to this side of life and spirituality and things of that nature?
Beautiful question, brother. Beautiful question. I always go back to when I was 15. We talk in 1996. So I'm telling my age. If anybody knows quick math, right? Telling my age, 1996. I'm downtown, having a ball. And you know what? My cousin name is Benny. Is Benny, cousin Benny Webb. And I had to correct it. I want to say Bernie so bad, but his name was Benny Webb, and he's an ancestor now. So anyway, just going back to to answer your question. And so I was downtown in Baltimore City having a ball. You know, I'm 15, I'm out with my friends, probably doing God knows what, you know, being a teenager in Baltimore City, having fun. And I remember our group walked past this brother who was selling books. And he pulled all of us over. Come on over here, y'all. Look, come on over here, buy my books. And we were 15. Nobody, we wasn't valuing books. Now we did read. I grew up in a family. I grew up in a household that emphasized reading, and I did read. You know, I read a lot. But to spend my money on a book, nah, I didn't value it to that degree, right? So I said, nah, brother, we don't want your book or whatever. We were getting ready to keep it pushing. But as we walked away, the brother said, you. Yeah, you come over here, come over here. And he put From the Browder File in my hand by Anthony T. Browder, right? From the Browder File, in my hand. And he said, I'll give you this book, sister, for free. I said, okay. And to this day, I couldn't tell you what this brother looked like. I couldn't tell you. But he put the book in my hand. I took it home with me. And it sat. It sat on my dresser. And I just kept looking at it like, do I want to read this book? And then I began to get curious about the cover. I was like, what is this person on the cover? What is this? So then I opened the book up one day and I decided to read the description of the book cover's illustration. And I said, oh, okay. So I read that, and then I started reading the book. I mean, really, really reading it. And the way Anthony T. Browder writes the book, it draws you in. You're drawn in with the information. You're also drawn in with the way he wrote it. You know how some books, Brother Sean, are hard to read? Like when I was about 16, 17, 18, The Miseducation of the Negro, that book was a hard read for me back then
It is.
because,
Yes, it is.
yeah. So give thanks, for Carter G. Woodson in his work. We got to remember it was published in 1933. So the way they wrote, the way they spoke and wrote back then it's drastically different from the way that we articulate ourselves, and the way we articulate ourselves. And I'm talking about orally and the way we write, right? Is drastically different. And so certain books was a hard read for me. Another hard read for me was Souls of Black Folks by W.E.B. Du Bois. And I'm talking about being a 17, 18, 19-year-old girl reading this stuff. And so both of those books, I had to put them down. But the funny part is, Brother Sean P., and I know I'm kind of going this way, but the funny part is I'm now rereading The Miseducation of the Negro for the third time, and I can read it through with no issues. And that's because I've grown in knowledge. and even in terms of my vocabulary, it's more, it's more extensive. So I can actually read the book and enjoy it now as a 44-year-old woman. And so anyway, um, so I'm reading from the Browder File again at the age of 15, and it was an easy read. He didn't try to use, collegiate words. I feel like he wrote it like that on purpose because he wanted, to reach our people, right? No matter what your educational level was. I think he really wrote that book for the people, not to sound intelligent, not to sound like he was speaking to college grads or PhDs. He really wrote it for the layperson to get it. And I think that's why From the Browder File resonates with so many of us. I think it was the combination of the knowledge, information, and the way he conveyed it. He conveyed it in a way, as my uncle Melvin would say, Bishop Allah, peace be upon his soul, as clear as a glass of water. Right? That's how he conveyed the material, and the material was empowering. I mean, that's why to this day my hair is natural and is locked. I wanted to go natural after I read From the Browder File. When I read the chapter entitled "The Politics of Hair," I wanted to go natural. I started questioning, Christianity when he started. When I read his chapter where he talked about the Nicene Council. I actually went to my pastor ready to debate. When I read that, and then he had me questioning the origin of the holidays that we celebrate. He talked about melanin. He talked about Kemet. I mean, he talked about so much stuff, so much knowledge that I never, information I've never heard of. And so I actually wrote a paper. I remember in 11th grade. Fast forward, read the book, and in 11th grade, my teacher, Miss Tasha Good, asked us to write a paper, and I forgot what she asked us to write a paper on, but I remember it was relevant to From the Browder File, and I ended up writing the paper. And when I wrote the paper, the teacher came to me. She said, "What are you reading? What are you reading?" She said, "I love your report. I learned so much, from your report." And she said, "Can I keep it?" And so Miss Tasha Good, she actually kept my junior teacher. She actually kept. Oh, there go Brother Craig Samuels. Salute to the great doctor in the building. Salute to the great doctor in the building. Dr. Samuels, I got your text message. I've been running all day, and we'll talk. I'll text you back when I get off of this live stream. But I did get your text message in the BB Fahodier to you as well, Dr. Samuels. But yeah, so again, when I read these chapters in From the Browder File, it was just very empowering, and that began that put me on the path of re-Africanization. It put me on that path of re-Africanization. So I look to Brother Anthony T. Browder, Dr. Anthony T. Browder. I view him as like my spiritual father in a sense. And I remember telling him that. And one day he told me, he was like, "Yeah, and I view you as my spiritual daughter." So it's, you know what I mean? And it came full circle because I had an opportunity to travel to Kemet with him in 2021. And so I remember reading his book, Now Valley Contributions to Civilization. And so then to be in Kemet with him, looking at the step pyramid, going to the pyramids of Giza, going to the Valley of the Tombs with the man that actually exposed me to this information and started me on this path of re-Africanization. It was like a full circle moment, and then we literally just went to London. I went to London and Paris with him this past July, where we looked at the African presence in London and the African presence in Paris. I had an opportunity to go to the British Museum and the Louvre and to attend 2 lectures by him. And so again, these were just full circle moments for me. But that is who started me on this trajectory. And then also, and I'll land my plane with this. After I read From the Browder File, it just unlocked a whole another world, for me. It's like now I'm reading books by Dr. Naeem Akbar, Breaking the Chains of Psychological Slavery, Community of Self, Know Thyself. Then I'm dabbing in, philosophies and opinions of Marcus Garvey. What is this about? And then as I'm growing in knowledge, one thing that, and I don't know what anybody's spiritual beliefs are, but I do believe in a creator. I do believe in the ancestors. I do believe there are forces that guide us. I don't think that anything happens by chance. My Jegna, Dr. Anthony T. Browder, he always says nothing happens by chance in a universe ruled by divine law and order, right? And so as I'm walking on this path, the ancestor, the creator, the ancestors, they put people, in your path that help you along your journey. So I'm starting to meet different people in the community. Shout out to Dr. Dennis Asar Winkler. Shout out to Dr. Dennis Asar Winkler. That brother put me on with Dr. Amos Wilson's work. He invited me on his platform, the Black Conscious Network, or Black Business Conscious Network. I'm probably butchering it, but he invited me on his platform and he read the definition of what it means to be conscious. And I said, well, brother, where you get that from? Oh, I got that, sister, on chapter 4, A Blueprint for Black Power. Oh, I need to get that. So he put me on the work. He put me on with Dr. Amos Wilson's work. Then I had a chance to meet one of his colleagues, Baba Sababu, who still prints Dr. Amos Wilson's work. So you start meeting people. And then shout out to Brother Onkaket. I can't leave him out. Brother Onkaket put me on with the work of Dr. Ben and Dr. John Henry Clark. I never heard of them until I met Brother Onk nearly 11 plus years ago. So as I've been on this journey, I've met a lot of brothers and even sisters who have assisted me, in just developing me. And I'm talking about my knowledge, helping me expand my knowledge base. But it all started from the Browder file. So I know that was a long explanation, but
No, I love it. I love it.
I wanted to be thorough. I wanted to be
We love
thorough.
it. We love a good breakdown on this show, man. But I want to touch on something real quick because you said it is important. And Mr. My man Ladarius in the chat, we talk about this all the time in private. See, like you said, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois back then, Frederick Douglass, Booker T. Washington, uh, Hubert Henry Harrison. A lot of these writers were way in the early 1900s, late 1800s. Their
Absolutely.
writing seems so elevated compared to a lot of things that we're reading right now. Because they had just came out of slavery not too long ago. They just couldn't read and write. And in a short period of time, they're writing to that high to where we're reading it right now. Like, wait a minute. I can't speed read. Let me slow this down. So talk about that. Like, have we regressed in our writing and understanding? Because they were
Absolutely.
writing so.
We absolutely have. I'm sitting here thinking about Baba Imhotep Fadiu, Baba Imhotep Fadiu of PLM, founder of PLM, and salute to him and his divine complement, Mama Ife. They just held a race first convention in Baltimore
Yeah,
City.
I heard about that.
Yeah, man, and
Yeah.
it
My
was it,
homeboy was out
it
there,
was packed.
Kofi.
Yeah, brother Kofi Pasai was out here. He was out here, and I got an opportunity to meet him and his queen. But it was packed out here. It was packed. And one thing he said, and because I don't want to get into the details of the convention, because he did ask that a lot of the details remain private, even though there are like clips online, there's clips on YouTube, that you can see of the convention. But the purpose of the convention was to discuss critical areas that directly impact the Black African community, right? And to not only discuss them, but come up with solutions, right? Come up with resolutions. And we did just that. But I remember having conversations with Baba Imhotep Fadiu prior to the Race First convention. And he said to me, he said, that I'm working to bring our family together, right? The Black family, the Black African family together. But he was saying how, because he studies a lot of the conventions, like he studied the Negro conventions of the 1800s. He studied the Pan-African Conference. He also studied the Pan-African Congresses. And so what he said was, and he read this stuff. Now, this brother is sharp. He read this stuff. And so what he concluded was that those people back then were much more, I hate to say this, they were much brighter than we are today. And like I said, this is a brother who studied these conventions and conferences and congresses, right? And he said, what I noticed is that these minds that came together back then, and we talking 1800s, 1830, 1829, 1830. So you said after slavery, this is even before slavery, before emancipation in 1863, that they were brighter. But let me tell you, brother Sean, and this may lead us into a whole nother, going down another rabbit hole. We have been systematically dumbed down. We have been systematically dumbed down. Bobby E. Wright talks about menticide. Menticide is real. Menticide in our community is real. You know, you got, these people, like I said, it's not a value on education, even on the way we articulate ourselves. Like in my family, I know a couple of family members are watching this now. They will even tell you in the chat, Miss Tiffany, let it be known if I'm lying. If I'm lying, I'm flying. Let them know in the chat. Even sometimes when I go back and I rewatch interviews that I have, if I butcher a word or I don't adequately describe someone's definition or concept of something, I'm very hard on myself about that, you know. But some people can listen to themselves and they're okay with like butchering words, butchering definitions. They don't really care about the way they articulate themselves. So even brother Sean, aside from being, dumbed down on us, people don't even care about the way we speak. No one is out here trying to articulate themselves to the best of them. And I'm not saying none of us, right? But a lot of us don't even place value on the way we articulate, information, the way we express ourselves, so a lot has changed, and especially with social media. We got to be really careful, with social media. Social media inundates people with a lot of misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation, and that contributes. And I agree with you, Dr. Samuels, that Bobby Motep is a forensic revolutionary. Absolutely. And so, with social media, they're inundating people with misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. That contributes to, us being dumbed down. That contributes to menticide. So no, we're not as brilliant as we was back then. You got drugs and alcohol. So you talk about nobody's valuing, education. You got social media. Then you got drugs and alcohol added to that. I just had a conversation with my students about drugs and alcohol and the impact that they have on the brain. I say some of y'all, oh doc, I'm smoking weed, and I could tell my weed smokers, brother Sean, in my classroom. And this is no diss to anybody that smoke weed, but this is what I told my students. Weed impacts people in different ways. Some people can actually smoke weed and still function optimally. You got some people like that. I wasn't like that, but some people are like that. They can smoke and they still, operate optimally, like they still operate fairly well. But then you got some people, it slow you down. It makes you slow. It makes you start dragging. And so I always can tell, even my weed smokers. So that's why in my classroom, my students laugh at me. I repeat everything 3 times. And the third time I repeat something, I say, this is for my weed smokers. And they'll start giggling. The students are good. This is for my weed smokers. And I'll repeat it a third time. And they laugh. They're laughing, but I'm serious. Because a lot of those students, a lot of them, some of them come to class high, so they can't catch, when you're teaching, they can't catch it the first time, the second time. You got to say it maybe 3 or 4 times for them to catch it. So it's a lot of different things that contribute to that decay in brilliance that you witness in our community.
And, I don't want to get off track at all, but like you had Brother Dr. Wesley Muhammad on your platform maybe a few times, I don't know, but he has a whole book called The Pot Plot, right?
Yes.
The Pot Plot.
Yes.
And he's talking about the weed that our elders smoked back in the 60s and the 70s and whatever. That's not the same thing they're smoking right now.
Yes.
That's not the same thing that's going around right now with these different cannabis places and all that. They're doing something totally different to that strand that have a different impact on you versus what your grandfather them smoked back in. I never was a street guy, never, but guys that were in the streets, they tell me it's not the same thing, Sean. It's not the same thing. It's not the same thing, brother Sean.
No, it's not. They're putting fentanyl in the stuff now. One of my students says something happened. Yeah, one of my freshman students shared with me today that something happened with one of his high school classmates because they laced it with fentanyl. That's the so like you said, the weed and stuff that people are smoking nowadays, that's not the same weed that they were
No,
smoking back in the day. It's
no,
different.
not at all.
It's
Not at all.
different.
And what I
It's
want to mention was I read a lot of biographies and memoirs, right?
uh-huh.
And like hypothetically, I have degrees in psychology, you in engineering and stuff like that. But to read these people that have multiple degrees in multiple fields in one lifetime, like,
In one
bro,
lifetime. Yeah,
that's incredible. And then they
it is.
were a part of vast organizations and societies. One person.
Yeah.
You're part of all these things politically and society, and you were probably a pastor or something that was part of it back then. You were that too,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and you got 5 degrees. Like, bro,
Yeah, they were our
it
ancestors
sounds
were rolling.
impossible now. That sounds crazy.
Yeah, they
That,
and
that,
they
that,
and they
that was normal back. That was regular back then. That was like
yeah,
regular.
that was regular stuff. And they were on a mission. Even if you read even if you read Dr. King's work, right? Like even if you read his work, hold on, I want to pull something up. But even if you read the work of Dr. King. And Dr. King wrote a paper when he was at Morehouse College. I believe it was in 1947 or 1946. But hold on, let me bring this up really quickly, brother.
So he was at Morehouse. He had to be a teenager still, right? He was 15 whenever he went to Morehouse.
Right, right, right. And
He
so
was a teenager writing whatever you pulling up. He was a teenager
whatever,
writing this.
there you go. Hold on,
That's crazy.
I'm gonna pull it up for you. Here it
Brilliant,
is,
brother.
right here. Yeah, very
Brilliant.
brilliant. I'm sitting here thinking about him and the way the things he thought about, the here it is. I'm pulling it up right now. I just want to be clear. I don't want to disseminate no misinformation. So he wrote a paper. Here it is. It says The Purpose of Education by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Morehouse College student paper. Now you found it. Now you
Uh-huh.
found it.
Uh-huh.
Now you found it. So now
I
I
try
can
to be
push.
quick. Try to be quick on the feet. Try to be
Oh,
quick.
no, not. So look, in 1947, this man was 18 years old, right? 18 years old. And if you read, let's just read it, brother Sean. Look at this. He said, as I engage in the so-called bull sessions around and about school. Now, this is an 18-year-old. And as I read this, I want the audience to think about how the average 18-year-old in our community articulates themselves, right? How they articulate themselves and how they write. He said, as I engage in the so called bull sessions around and about school, I too often find that most college men have a misconception of the purpose of education. Most of the brethren, and he put it in quotes, think that education should equip them with the proper instruments of exploitation so that they can forever trample over the masses. Still, others think that education should furnish them with noble ends rather than a means to an end. It seems to me that education has a twofold function to perform in the life of man in society. The one is utility and the other is culture. This is an 18-year-old speaking. Education must enable a man to become more efficient to achieve with increasing facility the legitimate goals of his life. All right. He says education must also train one for quick, resolute, and effective thinking. He said to think incisively and to think for oneself is very difficult. We are prone to let our mental life become invaded by legions of half truths, prejudice, and propaganda. Wait a minute. This is in 1947. And a lot of what he's saying is still true today. He said at this point, I often wonder whether or not education is fulfilling its purpose. A great majority of so called educated people do not think logically and scientifically. Even the press, the classroom, the platform, and the pulpit, in many instances, do not give us objective and unbiased truths. To save a man from the morass of propaganda, in my opinion, is one of the chief aims of education. He said education must enable one to sift and weigh evidence, to discern the true from the false and the real from the unreal and the facts from fiction. All right. He says the function of education, therefore, is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. But education which stops with efficiency may prove the greatest menace to society. He says the dangerous criminal may be gifted with reason, but no morals. We must remember that intelligence is not enough. Intelligence plus character is the true goal of education. The complete education gives one not only powerful concentration, but worthy objectives upon which to concentrate. The broad education will therefore transmit to one not only the accumulated knowledge of the race, but also the accumulated experience of social living. So I just wanted to read that because we were talking about
Man,
education.
that's
But
powerful.
then if you just look at that, so we were talking about education. And even back then, Dr. King was saying, well, wait a minute, I don't really know if, education might be failing us because a lot of people aren't really, they aren't thinking, and, they're becoming victims of half truth and what else he say, and propaganda. And a lot of the stuff that he's saying is still true today. But I just want to point out, and I don't want to say, but I also want to point out how he wrote. My students right now don't write like that. And I don't want to pull up student samples, of how they write, but my students do not write. That was eloquently written. The way he wrote it was eloquent, you know, but we don't even write like that anymore, let alone speak like that. So we're not speaking like that, and we're not writing like that. I remember having a build with one of my elders. I forgot. I don't know whether it's Professor James Small or Dr. James McIntosh. And shout out to those elders. But I was speaking to one of them. Oh, no. I don't think it was them. It may have been Baba Emotep. I know it was somebody that I hold in very high regard. And I agree 1,000% with you, Dr. Craig Samuels. He said there aren't many 40-year-old speaking or writing like that today, let alone 18-year-olds. He's absolutely correct. He's absolutely correct. But I remember speaking, it was either Baba Emotep, may have been Baba Amin, it could have been Professor James Small or Dr. James McIntosh. Those are usually my go-to people. But I was having a conversation with one of them, and I remember them talking about how it was in Kemet. Daggone, it could have been Dr. Browder. But anyway, I remember them talking about how it was in Kemet. And they were saying, like, can you imagine living in a society where people walked around and they memorized, the Declaration of Innocence, where and they recited it, before they walked in the door and left out the door. Could you imagine living in a society where people uttered African proverbs, when you go out, and just spoke with wisdom. It could have been Dr. Malana Karanga now that I'm thinking about it. But anyway, but can you imagine a society like that? And sadly, I can't. I mean, it's hard to even have, you know, um, intellectually stimulating conversations with some folks. And I love to be stimulated intellectually. I love that intellectual conversations. I'm that type of woman. If you don't capture me, intellectually, you don't get close to me at all, because I can't do it. I can't do it. Sometimes can we just chill and talk about, but nah, 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 nah. And maybe my father spoiled me, because he's a person who loves to talk about, who loves to have, intellectual conversations. He loves to talk about politics, economics, history, culture, social issues, racial issues. He loves to talk about that type of stuff. And so maybe I'm him, because I do share 50% of his DNA, but he's also my whole life had those type of conversations with me. So to the brothers, you want to talk to Dr. Maat, you better match me here, because if you don't grab me here, you're not gonna grab me anywhere else. And that's how I've
Mm,
been for
good,
for decades.
good.
But yeah.
Um,
Go ahead,
let me
brother.
let me let me do a slight pivot about intellectual conversation, right?
Let's
I want to
go.
go back to the beginning of where I first met you. And we ain't got to say platforms, we ain't got to say names. This is not a gotcha podcast. We're not doing that. But the important part is, at the time, it was a large debate community on YouTube and things of that nature, debating scholarships, lectures. Like, this was my grand awakening personally. When I first came
Oh,
across
okay.
this stuff back
Okay,
then,
cool.
this
Cool.
would made me want to go and read the books and do the scholarship and watch the PowerPoint slides and pause the video and write the names down. Like, but in the middle of that, it was a very male dominated scene at the time.
Absolutely.
But when I saw you on that screen, on that couch, spitting them flames with the PowerPoint slides. I was like, who in the world is that? And that was my introduction to Dr. Maat. Ever since
I
then,
know exactly what you're talking
following you.
about.
But
I
I
know
want to ask
exactly what
you
you're talking
about
about.
like what did that mean to you at that time in your journey? What did that mean? The debates, the lectures, the scholarships, and things you were doing back then. What did that mean for you at that time in your scholarship, your journey?
I think it was a fun time. I mean, I had some fun times. It did. It wasn't all bad. I did have some fun times. It was bad when I realized that when and that this is actually when I realized, and this is crazy. I realized during that time, and like I said, we had some fun times, like you said, some very interesting debates and just discussions. And I was a fan. I used to watch that platform all the time. And before I even got on the platform, I used to watch it all the time. And I enjoyed watching the brothers go at it. And they made me think of things that I never thought about. And I just, I loved it. I thought it was a good time, a fun time. And then I started going on the platform, and what I noticed is that when people don't match you or can't match you intellectually, that's when they resort to trying to defame you, trying to assassinate your character, and lie on you. And so just so I say this, earnestly. I had great times on that platform, but then it was a side to that platform that I didn't care for, and it was being a woman coming into a male dominated space. You would think it would be more males around you that protected you. And I'm not just saying, protect you physically. I'm talking about mentally, emotionally, spiritually, your reputation, protecting your reputation. And shout out to the brothers that did. I don't want to act like it was all. Shout out to some brothers that was like, "No, we ain't gonna let you." I heard rumors. The rumor mill told me that, and I'm not gonna say any names, but the rumor mill, let me know that it was, two individuals. You probably know who I'm talking about. They were going around slandering my name, and I was told that one of them did a lecture in South Carolina, and shout out to those brothers. They ran down on him from what I heard. They pulled him up and was like, "Nah, man, you ain't gonna be out here disrespecting that sister." So I heard they pulled him up in South Carolina. Then another one of them, that duo at one point, one of them went to Atlanta, and I heard that he was scared to come out the building because some brothers pulled him up like, "Wait a minute, we're not going to have you disrespect that sister." So I do want to salute those brothers who definitely did, hold me down, and they made sure that I was protected. And I'm talking about my reputation and just my who I am, my character. So they did definitely stand up. But on that particular platform that we're talking about, it was a lot of misogyny. And I know that when people hear that, black women keep saying misogyny. Ain't no misogyny. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And even, and that's nothing new. Misogyny, sexism, that's not new. Just read the autobiography of Asada Shakur, peace be upon her soul. She just transitioned. She talked about that. She talked about what she encountered in the Black Panther Party. I had a conversation with Dr. Milana Karenga about what took place in his US organization. The sisters actually wrote a whole article from his organization talking about the sexism and the misogyny that they experienced. And it's not just us. It wasn't just the Black Panther Party or just us. It wasn't that. It was a lot of contradictions that were happening in the Black Power movement. You had Black women who were literally right on the front line with Black men. And I'm not attacking Black men. I'm just speaking right now, family. I'm speaking the truth of a lot. I don't want to quantify, but I'm speaking the truth of some Black women. You're sitting there on the front line and you're fighting for Black people alongside your brother, and then it's your brother that's coming to assassinate your character or won't put you in a position of leadership because he feeling some type of way, or want to compete with you. And it was a lot of that stuff. And I witnessed that on that platform. I'm like, wait a minute, brother, I'm not attacking you personally. Why are you attacking me? I experienced a lot of that sexism and misogyny, but at the same time, they're promoting consciousness. How are you promoting consciousness? How are you promoting consciousness and you're mistreating your sister, brother? That's not consciousness. That's not consciousness at all. When you sit there and mistreat the women around you, you know, and that, so that's why I had to get away from that platform, brother. I
I
had to
want
get away
to
from it. Had to
I want to
go.
give a second round of flowers, right? Because that particular time period, I call it kind of a golden age for some of us. I meet so
Mhm.
many people that we all came awake around the same time, around that time. Like that was kind of for a lot of us, not from the East Coast, not from the Midwest. We never heard any of these things before. I'm here in Louisiana. I never heard 90% of what I was hearing this. It was like my brain just exploded. And I was just starting college at that time.
Mm-mm.
I was in college tearing up everything after that. So I owe all three of my degrees to that platform, with platforms like that.
Right,
And
right, right,
people
right,
like
right.
yourself, I owe all my degrees to the scholars at that time because they made me want to read more, study more, articulate myself better, and
Mhm.
present myself better. My public speaking career, my radio career, my platform now, I owe all of that to what was birth at that time. And I
Ashe.
gotta always, I know it's frowned upon now looking back on it, but at that time, I gotta give props to what it was for me at that time. You know?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I started with notice. I said, we had some fun times. We learned a lot. We had great discussions, but it was also another side. You know what I mean? It's also another side. So, me, I believe in balance. We say my balance. So it was
And,
also, I can't just give
you
it the
know,
glory and
you
not
know,
talk
yeah, yeah,
about the,
yeah,
the, the
yeah, yeah.
guts. You know what I mean? So,
Gotta give props to the sisters always, right? A sister a long time ago from DC, I was reading the Black Panther Party, Huey P. Newton, Geronimo Pratt, Bobby
mhm.
Seale. And she said, man, I know this is your journey. I'm loving what you're doing, but read about the sisters in the party and read their point of
Yeah,
view. And it really made me say, okay. I started digging into, like I said, Asada and Elin Brown and Erica Huggins and, keep going. And then that made me want to read the women of every movement, the Marcus Garvey UNIA movement and Dr. King, what they was doing with their ladies. And just seeing the trajectory of this common trend of, like you saying, the women in these movements being treated poorly.
oh
And
yeah.
they were the main stewards of the movement. They were the
Oh,
main ones
facts.
doing the work in the front lines and the administrative duties, whatever it was, but the guys had the face on the front. So I'm always
Absolutely. I
looking
mean,
at that,
yeah,
always.
I mean, always. I mean, if you look at any of the movements, look at Garvey. Garvey talks about it. Even when I think his first wife, it may have been his first wife or his second wife, she wrote about that. How the women were really, the backbones of that. You got look at the even the UNIA. I'm not the UNIA. I'm sorry. The Nation of Islam. That's what I was thinking. What was the nation under Elijah Muhammad? But if you look at the nation, the women, you look at the nation, look at the Dr. King. You can't talk about Dr. King without talking about Ella Fitzbaker. You can't talk about Ella Baker. You got to talk about Ella Baker. I think it's the Ella Baker, not Ella Fitzbaker. I'm thinking about Ella Fitzgerald. I'm getting it confused, but I want to say Ella Baker. You know what I mean? But it was Ella Baker. So you can't talk about Dr. King and don't talk about Ella Baker. So, you know, but the women we don't get the credit. And as much as people feel some type of way about Tariq Nasheed, I know he's getting ready to come out with a documentary on resistance, and he has an entire section of his documentary dedicated to women in the movement because he was saying that women just don't get their just due. We talk about Malcolm, but you don't talk about Shabazz. We talk about
Yeah,
Dr. King, you don't talk about Coretta.
yeah.
We talk about Garvey, but you don't talk about both his wives.
But
You know,
Winnie Mandela. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Talk about don't talk about
Yeah,
her, so
yeah,
the women we never
yeah.
get our
That's true.
just due.
That's true.
And so
And
I
back to
know they
Tyreek Nasheed, real quick. People say what they want about the hidden color series and
yeah,
all
they
that,
say what they want to say.
but again, this is how I met Dr. Kaba and Dr. Wayne Nobles and a lot of these Rodoko Rashidi. I met these people via that series. So
Yeah,
whatever happened. But this is my
yeah,
introduction to those scholars came
yeah.
from that. I
Yeah,
gotta
no,
give
no,
credit to that.
yeah, nobody can ever take away the fact that he exposed a whole nother generation to the older scholars. And you got to remember when Hidden Colors one, two, and this,
James Smalls.
yeah,
Yeah.
not the Francis Cress Wells, all of them were
Dr.
still
Francis
alive.
Crick.
Dr.
Yes.
Patricia Newton, all of them were
Yeah.
still alive during the time that he
That's right.
filmed all of them.
That's
So,
right.
people say what they want to say about him and, the stuff that he says. And do I agree with everything he says? No, I don't. Are there some things I agree with him? Absolutely. But you cannot dismiss, you can't take away the fact that he did expose a whole nother generation to those elders, to the scholarship, of those elders. And then like you said, and I've heard from younger people, who said that Hidden Colors, it was their introduction into knowledge,
Set me
you
on
know.
fire.
Yeah, that's what
When
they
it
said.
first came out, anybody came to the house, man, sit down and watch this. I don't care if you were black. I don't care if you was white. I don't care what your background was. You
Yeah.
come to my house at that time, man, sit down and watch this.
Yeah.
Tell me what you
So
think. Tell me what you
yeah,
see.
yeah,
You
no,
know
I'm
what I'm
with you.
saying?
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Yeah,
I'm with you a
yeah,
1000%.
yeah. I want to pivot right quick, right? Both of us being, academics in a classical sense. Let's talk about the importance that we always had on street scholarship, though, from back in the day. A lot of our greatest scholars didn't go to the university. A lot of our greatest scholars didn't go and become PhDs or whatever, and they still were world renowned intellect, and we still got that to this day. Speak about the need for the street scholarship, back to books being banned, back to censorship. We going outside with, we going on the block, we going in the
We call it
hood.
Bobby. I think Bobby Wright called it the one of them called it the communiversity. I think it was him that
Yeah,
started calling it the
yeah,
communiversity.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So in
Yeah.
the book about Hubert Henry Harrison, talked about him in the 1920s or 30s out there in Harlem with the soapbox, literally, kicking it off on the block. Hundreds of people, and again, being brilliant, speaking on vast topics: politics, science, sociology, psychology, just a wide breadth of topics, man. And so we're seeing that now, our current generation, we're on the block debating, debating this and debating that, which was a part of, the importance on that we still have.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. I think well, first of all, I want to say this: the community is alive and well. Shout out to Dr. Dennis Assaul Winkler. He holds monthly. Matter of fact, him and brother Jabari Natur of Reality Speaks here in Baltimore, they just partnered and they brought in Baba Ashwar Kwesi. So Baba Ashwar Kwesi gave a lecture last Saturday on Black Egypt. On Black Egypt, but I couldn't stay. I wanted to ask him. Thank you so much, Dr. Craig Samuels. He said Dr. Wright coined the term communiversity. Thank you so much. See, I love that's my big brother right there. He keeps me on track, man. He keeps me on track. But thank you so much, Dr. Samuels, for that. But yeah, yeah, yeah. So we have communiversities right here in Baltimore. They just brought in Baba Ashwar Kwesi to talk about Black Egypt. And I didn't stay for the entire, I think I missed like 30 minutes of it. I listened to the lecture for like an hour and a half, and about 30 minutes of it. I think I dipped like the last 30 minutes, but I did want to talk to him about some of his concepts. I did want to talk to him. But yeah, 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 absolutely. The community is very much needed because there are topics, and you and I talked about this a little bit backstage. In traditional academic institution, there are some topics that they want teachers to stay away from. You can't talk about that anymore. People are losing funding for talking about diversity, for talking about equity, for talking about inclusion, for talking about critical race theory, for talking about culturally relevant pedagogy. People are actually losing their jobs. They even had political conversations, whether or not you think Charlie Kirk was a bad guy or not. People are losing their jobs in academic institutions, not even just academic institutions, just everyday people working in other institutions are losing their jobs for having certain conversations. But I'm speaking about this in the context of academia. And, they, it was this concept or this idea of, oh my goodness, I talked about it. Brother Sean, with you backstage. What was it called? Free something. What was it called, Brother Sean? I mentioned it to you backstage.
Man,
What is it? What's the term, Dr. Craig Samuels? Help me out.
we did a
Hold
few
on.
topics backstage when we came up.
Hold on.
Free,
Hold on. Academic freedom. There we go.
okay, academic
Academic
freedom, academic
academic.
freedom.
So it was this whole idea of academic freedom, and this is what they tell you, that as an educator, you have academic freedom, right? Meaning that you should be able to go into your classroom and have conversations, right? Like, You should be able to do that. You have academic freedom, right? And let me read the proper definition of academic freedom. It says academic freedom is the principle that educators and researchers can teach, research, and publish their findings without censorship or retaliation from political, administrative, or other entities. Brother Sean, you and I both know that that is not happening nowadays. They're firing people. If you're in the classroom teaching certain things, they're getting you out of there. They get her out. It's a wing and a prayer that I'm still working where I'm working, So I'm on a wing and a prayer right now, because they come at my job all the time. Trust me, all the time. They're constantly doing background searches on me. They're doing all kinds of stuff. I get reported for all kinds of stuff. Doc is talking all kinds of stuff, So it's a wing and a prayer that I'm still in the institution because I still talk about these things. I do. I have conversations with my students. So to come to school and act like Charlie Kirk didn't get shot and why he got shot, and to not have that conversation, and it's all over social media, is bananas. Because at the end of the day, our students, they live in the real world too, and they get exposed to things, and they are impacted by things. So was I supposed to come back into the classroom and not mention Charlie Kirk? Was I supposed to go into the classroom and not mention Asada Shakur? Was I supposed to come in? So I come into the classroom and I talk about a number of things. Sometimes I come in and talk about the football game because a lot of my male students, they watch football. So I come in and I say, well, what happened with those Ravens, or what happened with those Cowboys? And my male students, and I think that that's what an educator should do. Like, we should be able to come.
You find that point of entry. The point of entry.
Absolutely, we should be able to come in, have a conversation about different things happening in the world around them, and then let's get into business. Let's get down to business. Let's start discussing engineering. And that's what I do. But so they say that we have academic freedom, in principle, but I'm going to argue that we don't have it in practice anymore. So going back to your initial question, that's why the communiversity is very important, because in those spaces, we can have those conversations. We can disseminate information, freely without being censored. You know what I mean? But I will say the downfall of the communiversity, because we just talked about how we see a decay in brilliance from the 1800s to now, right? I want to make sure that the communiversity is platforming people who are qualified to speak on certain subjects. Some people ain't qualified now. You know my quote. You know my quote.
Yeah. I gotta do it. I've been 10 years doing this. Matter of fact, on a radio show 2 days ago, I think I did it. I'm gonna try to get it right.
All right, go ahead, get it right.
To be certified, you must be verified by someone who is qualified.
There you go.
In real time.
I would have dropped the bomb. I would have dropped the bomb for you. I would have dropped the bomb from you, like.
I've been saying this for years. You got to be vetted. See, we love saying in this generation, there are no gatekeepers in hip hop. There are no gatekeepers in the movie industry. There are no gatekeepers. But what did we lose whenever we lost the gatekeepers, right? We're saying gatekeepers in a negative concept, but like, people should vet out who is important. And we see a decline in all of these industries because there is nobody to vet. But we're all just getting through. You know what I'm saying? That's the problem.
No, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree with you myself. I think that the universities are definitely needed. I think that they're needed. I'm apprehensive though about them, because we just got to make sure that we're platforming, qualified people, so people who have, who are very knowledgeable about what they're talking about. People, like you said, who've been vetted, so it's about who vets you, like who's vetted you, who's your Jegna, who's your teacher, who did you study under? We got to ask those questions. And I'm not saying that you got to go to school to get a PhD. I'm not saying that. But whose work did you study? Who did you study under? You know what I mean? Like, we got to ask those questions before we start platforming people, and exposing people, to the world. I mean, look at, I look, it might be some fans. I don't call no names of folks, but you see some folks who been platform and
Yeah,
they
yeah,
don't,
yeah.
they have a lick of, they don't have, as my grandmother would say, they don't have a lick of sense.
No.
So I just think that universities are important. I just want to reiterate this a third time. They are important. I just want us to be mindful of who we're platforming in those community,
That's right.
in those communities. Mhm.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you very, very much for your time. I value your time. I am blessed you said
Absolutely.
yes to come on the show, man.
Oh,
I love it.
absolutely.
I love returning guests. I got to bring you back. We got to do
Come
a
on,
part
let's
two.
go back. Let me ask you a question. Did we
I
get
got so
to?
many more to ask. We got to do part two. We got to do part two now. I got so many more. I got so many more. We got to do a part two.
Let's do it. Just let me
Okay.
know. Just let
Okay, you
me
got
know
it, Doc.
when. And
Yeah.
anytime you need me to come back, I'm here, especially on a
Okay.
Tuesday or Thursday. Those are my light days. So
Okay, well,
yeah,
cool
yeah.
then. We gonna set that up, man.
Well,
Thank you very, very much.
let me say this: my lighter days. I don't want to say
Oh, yeah,
light,
yeah, yeah.
because shoot, I've been working since 8 o'clock this morning. So,
And what they say,
but
small things to a giant, Doc. Small things to a giant, baby.
Ashe. Thank you so
But
much for all
thank you
that you
very much,
do.
man. Thanks
Thank you
for the
so
chat.
much for all
Anybody
you do.
watching it later, thank y'all very, very much. Check out her platform and her podcast is amazing. See y'all next time. Bless.
Bless, peace and love, warrior.
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you, warrior. You take care.